today's mindful moment. We always hear about Nazi influence in America before World War II, but it's usually portrayed as just a bunch of small fringe groups, pushing some propaganda. But what if that's not the whole picture? What if the reality was much more serious and organized, a real danger lurking in a place we'd never expect, right here in Los Angeles?
Yeah, it's easy to dismiss the idea of Nazis taking root in sunny Southern California, the land of Hollywood and dreams. It seems almost absurd. But the truth is far more complex and disturbing.
Today we're going to deep dive into Hitler in Los Angeles by Stephen J. Ross, and this book reveals a shocking truth about pre-war LA.
It meticulously documents a surprisingly active and organized Nazi presence operating right here in Los Angeles. And it shows how individuals both inside and outside the government were working tirelessly to counter this threat.
So get ready for a fascinating look at a truly unsettling chapter of American history.
Absolutely, and I think what you'll find particularly intriguing is how Nazi and fascist ideology found fertile ground in a place like 1930s Los Angeles. It challenges our assumptions, right?
Yeah, it does. It's easy to think of these movements as purely European phenomena, but as Ross's book shows, the reality was far more nuanced.
Exactly. There was a significant homegrown element to these groups, and they were actively working to advance their agenda.
So today we're going to uncover that hidden history. We're going to expose the extent of this threat and explore the courageous efforts to combat it.
Precisely. And I think a good place to start is with the story of Leon Lewis. He's really a central figure in this whole saga.
Right, Leon Lewis. Now, this guy might not be a household name, but he was a huge figure in the fight against anti-Semitism.
He was already a nationally known figure, having served as the executive secretary of the ADL.
The Anti-Defamation League.
That's right. And even back in the 1920s, he was raising the alarm about the growing threat of anti-Semitism, both in Europe and right here in the U.S. He was particularly concerned about the rise of Hitler.
So this was something he was deeply invested in.
Absolutely. And when he moved to Los Angeles in 1931, he brought that awareness and that deep concern with him.
So Lewis arrives in L.A., already attuned to the potential for danger. And it's important to remember that this wasn't happening in a vacuum.
Right. This was the time when similar ideologies were gaining momentum in Europe, and LA was not immune to those global trends.
You had these Nazi and fascist organizations popping up, mirroring what was happening in Germany and Italy.
Precisely. And they were using the same rhetoric, scapegoating Jews for the economic crisis. In fact, after Roosevelt took office in March 1933, they began attacking his policies, calling them the Jew deal.
The Jew deal. Oh, man. And they were openly calling for the removal of Jews from positions of authority.
Yeah, it was pretty blatant.
And all of this was happening against the backdrop of truly horrifying developments in Germany. I mean, after Hitler became chancellor in January 1933, things just escalated so rapidly.
They did. It was a systematic state-sponsored campaign of discrimination and persecution.
Within months, you had Jews being excluded from the civil service, banned from owning businesses, pushed out of universities, even sports. They were being targeted in every aspect of life.
And then, of course, there was the book burning.
Yeah, in May 1933. It was a chilling symbol of the intellectual and cultural repression that was to come.
Absolutely. It was a very clear sign of the direction things were heading. And what's really striking is that even as early as March 1933, the London Daily Herald was predicting a pogrom in Germany on an unprecedented scale.
So the warning signs were there.
They were. The question is, how did people react?
Well, there were definitely initial reactions here in the U.S.
Yeah.
The book talked about a massive rally in New York City, 65,000 people coming out to support a worldwide boycott of German goods. And there were similar demonstrations in over 70 cities.
There were, a big one in Chicago. But the response in L.A. was a little more mixed, even within the Jewish community itself.
Right. You had some prominent figures who were pushing for aggressive boycotts, like we're seeing on the East Coast.
Exactly. But others favored a more low-key approach. They thought it would be more effective to enlist Christian leaders to kind of quietly pressure Hitler.
So there was this debate about the most effective way to respond.
There was. And while these discussions were going on, the Nazi presence in LA was becoming more organized and more vocal.
Yeah, the book details how they were holding these regular closed-door meetings at their headquarters, and they were attracting a good number of local sympathizers.
They were. And one informant who had infiltrated these circles, he reported to Leon Lewis about a guy named Hans Winterhalter. He was stirring up a lot of anti-Jewish sentiment at these meetings.
Wow, so this Winterhalter guy, he was really active in spreading this hate.
He was, and it wasn't just limited to these private meetings. Groups like the Friends of New Germany, they were holding public gatherings where the rhetoric was even more blatant.
Really? Public gatherings. So this wasn't just happening behind closed doors.
No, it was out in the open. The book quotes speakers saying things like, Jews hate Gentiles and cheat us whenever they can. And even more disturbing stuff like, Jews are not of the white race, they are Semites, half niggers. They were putting up signs warning people to beware of Jewish domination.
It's just unbelievable that this kind of hate speech was being spread so openly in Los Angeles.
It is. And what makes it even more concerning is that the U.S. government at the time was really ill-equipped to deal with this kind of threat.
Right. The book talks about the lack of a strong espionage or counter-espionage system in the early 1930s. The FBI was small. They didn't have much training in this area. Basically, they weren't really doing any domestic spying unless the Army or Navy asked them to.
Yeah, and those branches themselves had very limited budgets for that kind of thing.
So the U.S. was basically caught flat-footed.
Yeah, pretty much. In fact, there was a journalist named Kurt Reese. He was from Berlin originally, and he was covering Hollywood at the time. In 1934, he made a pretty stark observation.
What did he say?
Well, he pointed out that the U.S. was the only major power in the world that didn't have a proper espionage system in place.
Wow.
And he went on to warn that Nazi agents were actively plotting against America every single day. He even mentioned that Hitler and Goebbels were bragging about how easy it would be to incite unrest and revolution in the U.S.
That's chilling. So you've got this growing Nazi movement in L.A., a divided response within the Jewish community, and a government that's totally unprepared to deal with the threat. It's a recipe for disaster.
It really is, and it makes you realize how fragile things were, how easily these extremist ideologies could take root and spread.
Exactly. And I think this connects to something that might be of interest to our listeners. In a similar vein of providing concise analysis, there's a YouTube channel called Mindful Moments. Nourish your mind on the go.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that. They do these really interesting AI audiobook analyses.
They do, and they cover a wide range of topics, offering insights and summaries that help you grasp key concepts quickly and efficiently.
It's a great resource for anyone who wants to learn more about complex subjects without having to wade through hours of content.
Absolutely. And speaking of complex subjects, our deep dive into the Nazi presence in L.A. doesn't end here. As we move forward, we're going to see how things escalate even further.
Right, we'll see how Hollywood itself became entangled in these events, and how individuals like Leon Lewis had to take increasingly risky actions to counter the threat.
We'll be introduced to some fascinating and important figures like Captain Robert Pape. He was a local leader in the Friends of New Germany, and he had direct ties to Hitler and Goebbels.
We'll delve into the dangerous work of undercover agents like John Schmidt, who infiltrated Nazi circles at places like the Alt Heidelberg restaurant. He managed to gain their trust and get a first-hand look at their plans.
So Schmidt was really on the front lines of this hidden war.
He was, and the information he gathered was crucial in understanding the true extent of the danger.
Yeah, in the book, Schmidt describes overhearing conversations at the Alt Heidelberg where people were saying that President Roosevelt was a puppet of international Jewry and that he needed to be replaced.
It's incredible how deep this conspiracy thinking went.
It is, and it shows how determined they were to undermine American democracy.
Absolutely. And through Schmidt's work, we get a glimpse into the minds of these individuals. We see how they were justifying their hate and how they were planning to act on it.
It's a chilling reminder of how easily extremist ideas can take hold. And it's a testament to the courage of those who are willing to fight back.
Absolutely. So what are some of the key takeaways from this initial exploration of Nazi activity in Los Angeles? What should our listeners be thinking about as we move forward?
Well, first and foremost, I think it challenges the notion that this was just a minor historical footnote. It was a real and present danger. We see that from the organized presence of these groups, from the hateful rhetoric they were spreading, and from the concrete plans they were making.
Right, and we also see the importance of early warnings and the dangers of complacency. People were sounding the alarm, but not everyone was listening, and the government was slow to react.
So what if those warnings had been heeded? What if the authorities had taken more decisive action? How might history have unfolded differently?
It's a question worth pondering. It makes you think about the responsibility we all have to be vigilant and to challenge extremist ideologies whenever and wherever they arise.
It really does. This deep dive into a hidden chapter of American history has been both fascinating and unsettling, and it raises important questions about the enduring threat of extremism.
It's a reminder that the fight for democracy and tolerance is ongoing. We can't afford to be complacent.
So if this exploration of Nazi activity in pre-war LA has sparked your interest, be sure to subscribe to The Deep Dive for more insightful explorations into the past. And share this episode with anyone who appreciates uncovering the lesser-known stories that have shaped our world.
Absolutely. And if you want to delve even deeper into this topic, we highly recommend checking out Stephen J. Ross's book, Hitler in Los Angeles. You can find a link to purchase it in the show notes. It's a must-read for anyone interested in this fascinating and disturbing chapter of American history.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.